prana ladaiva nachatmaja nastriyo na mahirajam nadadas chativallabha. Translation. Maharaj Katvanga thought, not even my life is dearer to me than the Brahminical culture and the Brahmanas, who are worshipped by my family. What then is to be said of my kingdom, land, wife, children, and opulence? Nothing is dearer to me than the Brahmanas. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Maharaj Katvanga, being in favor of the Brahminical culture, wanted to utilize one moment's time by fully surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord is worshipped with this prayer. Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitayecha Jagatitaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Absolute Truth, Krishna, who is the well-wisher of the cows and the Brahmanas, as well as the living entities in general. I offer my repeated obeisances to Govinda, who is the pleasure reservoir for all the senses. A devotee of Krishna is very much attached to Brahminical culture, indeed an expert personality who knows who Krishna is and what he wants is a real Brahmana. Brahma Janatiti Brahmana. Krishna is the Parabrahman, and therefore all Krishna conscious persons or devotees of Krishna are exalted Brahmanas. Katvanga Maharaj regarded the devotees of Krishna as the real Brahmanas and the real light for human society. One who desires to advance in Krishna consciousness and spiritual understanding must give the utmost importance to Brahminical culture and must understand Krishna, Krishnaya, Govindaya. Then his life will be successful. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So beg for the blessings of the assembled devotees that we can say something for the benefit of all of the devotees, for the pleasure of Shri Radha Mulidhar, and may it be in line with Guru Parampara. Hare Krishna, nice to be with all of you. So we're reading Canto 9, Chapter 9, Text 43. I'll read this text again. Maharaj Katvanga thought, not even my life is dearer to me than the Brahminical culture and the Brahmanas, who are worshipped by my family. What then is to be said of my kingdom, land, wife, children, and opulence? Nothing is dearer to me than the Brahmanas. So this chapter is called the Dynasty of Amshuman, and a list of personalities is given. And when coming to the name Katvanga, Shukadeva Goswami pauses to glorify this great king. All these names are given one after the other. And then Katvanga is mentioned, and about 10 verses are given about Katvanga Maharaj, a little bit of his story. He was also previously mentioned in the second canto. What was the context there? Well, Parikshit Maharaj, Parikshit was cursed to die in 7 days. So he asked a question. What is the prime duty of a person who's about to die? This is common sense intelligence to ask this question. When we're children, we ask such questions sometimes. And then a kind of covering comes over us, conditioning, and we forget about these essential questions. It's such common sense to ask, what is this place, this world? Where did I come from? Where am I going after death? So this is common sense. So Parikshit asked this question, what is the prime duty of a person who's about to die? And an answer is given directly in one verse. The acharyas have pointed out this. This is second canto, first chapter, text 11. But Shukadeva Goswami in answer directly says, Harinam Anukirtanam, that the prime duty, focus for a person who's going to die is to chant and glorify the holy name of Hari, Krishna. So Shukadeva Goswami, he speaks this essential verse, and then he says, what's the value of living many, many years in this world if one is pramatasya, which means in a state of confusion or darkness? What's the point of living so many years if one is covered in that way by this darkness? All right? We're born with this darkness, actually. Sarva Bhutani Samoham Sarge. Krishna says, Sarge, one is born into this darkness. You think about, as soon as a baby is born, then immediately so many people are waiting to cover a conditioning on that child, right? Think about it. The first year a baby is born, and the parents come. Immediately they rush in on the baby. Then there's teachers growing up. We have our teachers in schools. There's the culture that we're born into, right? That's already there waiting. And then the media, the culture today now basically means, the media, all that involves also covering us. Certain psychiatrists are there. They're also waiting in case you need some help. They will also cover. Pseudo-religious people, they're also everywhere. They will come and cover more. And by the time a person comes to the end of life, the covering is complete. And because they never were able to know or focus on the one thing necessary, the one most essential thing, then they die in this darkness and they die in this fear. And then again, another birth, and again, born in darkness and another conditioning. This goes on unless one has the contact with someone like Shukadeva Goswami, who can actually give light, give real truth, give real direction, point out the real goal, and also the method to achieve that goal. So that is real light. That is very rare in this world. Think about all the babies being born right now in this moment, and every day. And there's a whole conditioning that's just waiting for them, coming through so many sources, people and media and culture, the music. It's all there already, and it will just cover. And one can live a whole life and never think, what is the prime duty of a person who's about to die? What happens after death? but great souls always come. I was reading a verse in the third canto the other day. This nice verse. I think it was Vidura was speaking, and he says this, the great souls are wandering on the surface of the globe. Charanti means that they're walking, and it's in the present tense. It means they're always walking, not that they were just some great sages long ago, but there are always great souls walking on the surface of the globe. And what are they doing? By their presence, they're just making others fortunate. By their own free will, they come into this world, even though they are not bound like we are by the laws of karma. They're free, but they come here out of free will, walking everywhere along the surface of the globe, making others fortunate. So Shukadev Goswami, he explains that, what's the point of living many, many years if you're covered in this pramatasya, darkness, madness? And then he says, better just one moment of living in consciousness, one moment in full consciousness. Shreyase means, what is that full consciousness? It's directed towards the supreme goal, Shreyas. Better just one moment than many, many years covered. So after that verse that he says, better one moment, or perhaps it's the same verse, he mentions in this context Khatvanga Maharaj as an example. So this is the context of Khatvanga Maharaj first being mentioned in the second canto. And I want to read that verse, such a nice verse. This is second canto, first chapter, 13th verse. Khatvango namo rajasi gyatveyatam iha yusha muhurtat sarva udrishja gatavan abhayam harim. So he says, the saintly king Khatvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. So that is one verse in the second canto that first mentions Khatvanga Maharaj. And now here in the ninth canto, we're getting a bit more is given about this exemplary king who is teaching us really how to die. This lesson is taught again and again in the Bhagavatam, how to die. The demigods, they approached Khatvanga Maharaj, which is amazing because the demigods asked for his assistance in fighting. So imagine, they came to the earth, they came to a human being. How great was Khatvanga Maharaj that the demigods are seeking his help in a fight. So Khatvanga Maharaj goes to the world of the demigods. He's taken there. And we have to remember that one day in that world, on this higher realm of the demigods, equals 6 months down here in our world. So that means if he fought for, let's say, a few days, years passed by, according to where he's actually from, according to, his relationships and his life on earth. So anyway, Khatvanga Maharaj was successful. The demigods were grateful of his fighting ability and how he was able to help them and serve in this way. And so they offered him a benediction. The demigods can give benedictions. They can give so many things. And so they were grateful to Khatvanga, and they asked, let us give you a benediction for your glorious fighting, how you have assisted us. And Khatvanga Maharaj, what does he ask? I just want to know when I will die. And then the demigods told him, in just a few moments. So again, a few moments, they say, maybe a moment. But it appears again that a moment in the world of the demigods, he had a little more time than that, actually, because he returned to the earth. and he prepared himself. Right? He prepared himself for death. So we want to discuss this form of the Lord, which is very difficult to perceive or remember, although it's always around us and it's always happening. What is that form of the Lord? The form of the Lord is, this form of the Lord is death. Krishna says, Mrityu sarva haras chaham, that I am death. So this is actually a form of the Lord that's very difficult to keep our minds on. When the mind is very passionate, it gets very busy and distracted. We can't keep it in view. Have you noticed that? It's so difficult to keep the reality of death in view as we go about our days. Because the mind is in a closed box, very narrow. Passionate means narrow, closed. And also, we're afraid of death. So there's also an unwillingness to look at it and to stay focused on it. So because of these two reasons, a passionate mind, but also an unwillingness to face this fear, which is a fundamental fear within all of us, the fear of death. For those two reasons, we can't keep it there. We can't stay aware of it. But an expanded mind, a sober mind, one who hears from true authorities, one who opens themselves to hear, and as the mind begins to expand, sober mind, courageous mind, begins to want to see this thing called death. We want to remain aware of it, and remember it always. So remembering death doesn't mean that you're just picturing yourself in the future on some deathbed. It's not quite like that. The remembrance of death is more just staying alert to that reality, not picturing it. You know, the remembrance of death, I'm always thinking of my death, I'm just imagining. It's not exactly like that, but one is so sober and alert and awake that they don't lose sight of that. They know how to act with sobriety. There's a perspective. So that stays there. Many philosophers would emphasize this remembrance of death as being important. There was one Roman Stoic philosopher, Seneca, and he would often say that one should study death always, throughout their whole life, study death. Of course, Plato as well, he said the whole purpose of philosophy is the preparation for death. And Srila Prabhupada said a similar thing to the devotees. He said that one should always keep death in the forefront of their mind. Mm-hmm. But we see how difficult that is, right? We know this story in the Mahabharata. There's a conversation between Yamaraj and Yudhisthira. And Yamaraj is testing Yudhisthira with questions. And Yudhisthira is giving perfect responses, perfect answers. And the conversation, it sort of culminates in this question that, what is the most amazing thing of all? The word used is ascharya, which is also found in the Bhagavad Gita, amazing, when it speaks of the soul as amazing. So what is ascharya? What is the most amazing thing? And Yudhisthira responds that at every moment, countless living beings are dying. But each person is thinking, not I. I will not die. Of course, we know we're going to die, right? But there's not much meaning to that kind of knowing because it doesn't show up in our life that we know. We can say, I know I'm going to die, right? For example, Someone may know, someone's sitting in an apartment and the landlord comes and says, in 1 month, you're going to be gone. You're evicted in 1 month. So the person says, okay, I understand that. Then 2 weeks pass by, 3 weeks pass by. The landlord comes into the apartment. He notices nothing is packed. No arrangements are being made. Person is just sitting there watching television, laughing. 4 weeks pass, so 1 month you're gone. 27 days, 28 days, the landlord comes back, still nothing is packed, no changes. This person's just cooking himself something in the kitchen, relaxing. So you can say, I know I'm going to die. But if our life is not showing that knowledge, is there some preparation? What are we doing? What are we thinking about? What are we focusing on? Then there's no meaning to that knowing. Right? We just look at our behavior. We can say, I know I'm going to die. Look at our behavior, making plans and more plans and attachments and more and new attachments and distractions and wasted time, right? And then some new attachments and some new plans. And we just keep going on and on. No foresight. We do this to the very, very end. And then suddenly, when the time comes of death, we're shocked that it's happening. What? Where did this come from? How? Why? No. How is this? I remember I met one man, old man, he was in the hospital and I went to see him. And he was about 94 years old Italian man. And I remember I went to see him and asked, how are you doing? What's going on for you right now? What's most important to you? And he said, I just can't understand why this is happening. And I said, what can you say more about that? What's happening? This, I can't believe this. He said, I've always been good. I've gone to church. I've done these things and I'm dying. He wasn't dying for some accident or something. It was just old age. He was 94, and he was saying he was shocked that this is happening. And he said, why? I don't understand. I've done things. I came here from Italy to America and my family, and I was a good father and a good husband, and I had our kids and we raised our family. And how could this be happening? And I couldn't believe he was sharing this because he was just dying of old age. And he was totally shocked and he was trying to figure out why, as if he had never considered it before. Right? And so it sweeps in and shocks us. But a person throughout life should just be considering this. This will come. How should I live, therefore? Now, today. I was mentioning that philosopher Seneca, he says something like this. He says, it struck me reading this once. He was writing a letter to a friend of his, and he's always talking about death, this particular philosopher. And his friend was going to die, and pretty young, I think, as well. And he wrote, and so the friend was complaining that this was happening and sad that this was happening. And these are Stoic philosophers. They can be a little heavy sometimes, but he wrote him back a letter and said, what right have you to complain about dying? Every single living being who has ever lived has had to walk through this gate. I will, everyone has. What right do you have to complain? He said, if God wills it, shouldn't we also will it? If it's willed by God, should it not be willed by us? Should we not accept it? So you're complaining. But we all have to do this. Every person who ever existed has had to go through this in this material world. So we should will what is willed for us by God. That's how he put it. But there's a resistance to this, right? This is to accept to accept dying, death. It's very difficult. We're all on this journey of accepting death. There's a psychiatrist, author also, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she worked with many people who were dying, and she was famous for from her experience seeing that people go through certain stages at the time of death, right? She talks about 5 stages. Perhaps some of you have heard of this. When this news comes or one is informed that they will die, you say the first stage is a kind of denial. Again, it catches us off guard, even though we know it from the very beginning of our lives. It can't be. Denial. We deny it. And she says the next stage is, when that doesn't work, you deny, but you start to realize at some point that this is actually happening. And then anger. You sometimes see this anger. Like this man I was describing earlier, he was kind of like angry, shocked. How could this be happening? It's interesting to consider this, because angry at who? Angry at what? You can say, well, angry at the universe, which is really saying angry at God. Really, our relationship with God comes out at this time when I'm angry that this is the way it is. Well, who makes things the way they are? So someone may not be conscious of it, but the anger, it's anger for the way it is, anger that death exists. But God is allowing death. Maybe there's some deeper meaning. Maybe I can trust that even within dying, there's some plan there, that there's something there for me. If I connect to that, is there some possibility of connecting and learning something and maybe even transforming from this process? Death is very powerful. You can transform because of death. Maybe God has some plan. Maybe, that's a possibility, opening to that. So denial, anger. The next stage was bargaining. And again, who are you bargaining with? So anger doesn't work, and I start to bargain. Please just let me live. If I live, I'll do this, I'll do that. Again, this is like a conversation with God, even though many people may not express it in that way. I don't think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross even made this connection, but bargaining. Who are we bargaining with? The thin air? As we're going through this process, we're bargaining with God. Please let me live. If you let me live, I will do this. I will make this change. This will happen. And then still there's no answer. There's no response. So the next stage is a kind of depression. Hopeless. One becomes hopeless. Coming to terms with this is actually going to happen. Hopelessness, which also is another form of godlessness. To be completely hopeless means to say that there's no meaning to any of this. There's no meaning. But actually everything has infinite meaning, because God is behind everything. So even something like death, there's meaning in death. But we become hopeless. We lose that. And then the 5th stage that hopefully a person comes to is, after going through all these ups and downs and these struggles, that finally one comes to an acceptance of what's actually happening. Acceptance. That may or may not happen for a person. These stages they're not like boxes that are always in the same order. Things can be happening simultaneously, but sometimes we can see a kind of sequence, or something like a sequence. And a person finally can accept, which means accepting God, because God has also, we're in this material world, but everything in this material world that's happening, karma, reincarnation, all these things, bad karma, whatever it may be, this is also within the plan of the Lord. He's so wise that even when we deviate and move away from him and put ourselves in a difficult situation, but still laws are taking place that are actually trying to help us, to reform us, to bring us back to Krishna. And so we should consider, what is this thing called death? It seems to be, it just stops everything about what I'm doing. It's so powerful, and it's so fearful. For that reason, it has transformative power. If we could face it in the right light with the right understanding, for that very reason, it has the power to transform. So there's a story also with the Buddha, that one lady, she came to the Buddha hearing that he had powers, that he was some great enlightened being, and she brought her child who had passed away. Her young child passed away, and she brought her child to where the Buddha was and said, "Can you please bring my child back to life?" And he said, "Yes, I can bring your child back to life, but I need you to bring me mustard seeds, but you have to get them from homes where nobody has died." And so she thought, okay, so she was going to the next house, and she said, "Do you have mustard seeds?" They said, "Yes, of course. But has anyone died in this home? I need to know first." And the person said, "Yes, 3 months ago, our grandmother had passed away here." "Okay, that won't work." She went to the next house. "I need mustard seeds." "Yes, we have them. But has anybody died in this home?" "Oh, yes, 5 years ago, father died." And like this, every home she went to, she was learning. She couldn't bring back even one mustard seed from a home where nobody had died. And so she came back to the Buddha. And he said, "So did you get the mustard seeds?" And she said, "No." And she actually said, "Well, never mind, actually, because I'm realizing we all have to die, including me. So rather than just, it's something we all have to accept. I have to accept it. I'll also die. Everybody has to accept it. But I want a real solution to this problem." So this was interesting. And notice this, that she accepted it. She came to the point of accepting, but not totally, because she also said, "I want a real solution." She realized the solution is not just to bring somebody back to life in this one life, but something still wasn't right. I accept that I will die, but yet I want a real solution to this problem. So acceptance, we have to accept. And at the same time, we don't totally accept as devotees, right? Because there is something that is not the way it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to die, actually. And a devotee thinks, well, I accept that this is coming to me, but there must be a solution also. What is the solution? You see, Katvanga and also Bhishma and Parikshit, when they all were aware that they were going to die, they accepted it. And then, that wasn't it. Then they took shelter completely of the supreme solution, Krishna. It says Katvanga Maharaj took shelter of the supreme safety, Krishna. So it's an acceptance of, this is the way, this is the place where I am. Mrityu Loka, it's called the world of death. So accepting that I will die. And now absorb myself in the solution, in the safety, in the supreme personality of Godhead. This is the example we see again and again in the Bhagavatam. And the question for us is, how were they able to do this? How did Khatvanga do this? He was a warrior, great warrior. And when he knew the time was coming, he just transferred his consciousness completely at the lotus feet of Krishna. Same thing with Bhishma Dev, right? There's a beautiful verse from Bhishma Dev saying, fought so many battles, so many duties, so many responsibilities, and now I turn my attention to you, Krishna, and take shelter. And Parikshit also, right? He accepted, he was cursed, 7 days you'll die, so he accepted that. He didn't try to make a change, even though he could have. So acceptance is there, and then turning to the supreme shelter. So how is Khatvanga able? You can look at these verses. How was he able to gloriously pass this final examination? Sometimes death is called the final examination, right? What's being examined? What's being tested? What's being tested is our state of consciousness, the state of consciousness that we've created, cultivated throughout life. That's what's being tested. So that Krishna consciousness actually has to enter into us very deeply. Prabhupada gives a warning of the parrot, You can train a parrot to chant Hare Krishna. You ever see a parrot? Some parrots can chant Hare Krishna when they see you. Hare Bol. But Prabhupada says, but if the bird catches the parrot, death comes. What will the parrot say at that time? Not Hare Krishna. It goes back to its real bird nature. Squawk, squawk, squawk. It just makes sounds that it always made. So even though the training was there, the repetition of Krishna's name was there, but when death came, the bird just does what a bird always does, makes the sound it always makes. So we have to make sure that's not happening to us, that the Krishna consciousness is actually entering into us very deeply. Why doesn't that happen? Why doesn't it enter us deeply? We should always be asking ourselves these questions. Looking at a verse the other day from the Gita, Purusha Prakriti Stohi. That the spirit falls into the material energy. Purusha Prakriti Stohi. As soon as the spirit falls into the material energy, then immediately there's a lack because we're disconnected from who we truly are, from our relationship with God. So there's a lack. And then we become impatient to fulfill that lack within the three modes of nature, because now we're in the material energy and we're feeling a lack. And we don't want to focus on that lack because it's uncomfortable. But we see some relief here and there in this world. We get relief. And then we become attached to those things and we cling to those things. People, ideas, desires, things, whatever it may be, but we get attached. And then what does that cause? This verse says, Sat asat yoni janmasu. It causes repeated birth again and again in good and evil wombs. Yoni means wombs. So it causes a person to take birth sometimes in a good situation, sometimes in a bad situation. But it's the attachment because of the lack that we actually feel. It's a very deep lack in the core of the heart, and we reach out for relief in different ways. What if we could focus in on that lack? Another verse in the Bhagavatam says that life after life, the set of our attachments changes. We have certain attachments and illusions and lamentations. Every life the particularities of that changes. But why is it that every life, they keep surrounding me? I keep drawing them all in. What's in it? What's inside of me that keeps drawing in a different set of attachments, desires, fears, changing every life, but still always being drawn in? Because if we go into our own heart, we'll see that it's like they have these temples in South India sometimes. On the outside, there's all these designs and sometimes even sensual uh, sculptings and so forth. But if you go in the temple, and then you may see different demigods. But if you go deeper in the temple, if you go further and further in, and you finally come into the inner sanctuary of the temple, the deepest, most holy part of the whole structure, then you see the altar and you see the throne. So if we go into our own heart, many things are there. And finally, you go deep enough and you come to the throne. And who's there in that throne? I am there. I'm there. And I want to stay there. Even if I'm suffering, I want to stay there. I don't want to give up that position. You see, there's an unwillingness to move from that position in all of us. And I'm not talking about just these are evil people. These are just ordinary people. Everyone in this material world, if you enter into the inner sanctuary of the heart, we're sitting there and we don't want to move. And therefore, the attachments and the fears and all of these things, they change life after life, but they they shift around because of the mode shifting. But what's drawing them all in around me is that I want to be on this throne. Maybe not in some gross way or some crazy way, I'm the ruler of the world, something like that. But if you go in to your own heart, you'll see that we want to very strongly stay in that position. So that thing within us, that false ego that's there at the very core, that is the thing that's preventing Krishna consciousness from going in very deeply. So then, but we can't take it out ourselves either. We can't just overcome it, but we become more and more aware of it. And we go on with our life and we keep it there. We keep it in the background, that we know that there is part of me that is unwilling to move. But Krishna is actually the true center. And I'm starting to desire that Krishna takes that position. So that desire has to grow. But it grows when we feel a little bit of the lamentation, when we're very aware that this is the whole problem of life. You see, we project this out. There's so many outer problems that we want to solve. But everybody has this very deep-rooted inner problem. And a sincere person will focus all their attention and energy on that in life. We won't get so busy with other people and what they're doing. They also have that same duty to go into their own heart and see how the false ego creates all the mess that we see in this material world. Right? So we keep that always there in the background. It's a little uncomfortable to face it, but that's actually good for us to just let it stay there throughout the day. You know, we're going on with our life, we have our jobs, but we remember that this is the root problem. It's within me, I'm aware of it, and I want to face it now. And, you know, when say, you know, you're going throughout your day and suddenly there's some loss, some difficulty comes. Like you lost some money, let's say. It's painful, right? So become aware. Why is this so painful? Because life is not going according to what I want. I want. It's meant to go according to the way I want. You see, that's the pain of the false ego, actually. And this is not to condemn anybody. We're just looking at this very clearly, what's happening within ourselves. We shouldn't feel terrible about ourselves or something, but we should know what's happening. You know, when I'm feeling angry, who's angry when I'm angry? Something goes wrong in life, suddenly I'm angry. So we come back again to that part of me, and we'll see there's a very strong person sitting in that throne who's saying things should not go against the way I need them to go and I want them to go, and they are, and therefore I'm angry. So we can feel that anger, enter into it, don't push it aside, feel it and go through it and endure it and endure the pain that comes up. And if we can endure it in the right way, it's like the false ego kind of dying away. We want the false ego to die away from the center. If this is the preparation for death, if this is practiced throughout life, whenever some little issue, some little challenge comes into your life, see some very difficult feeling comes upon you, and then taking the time to sit with it and feel it and finding, we find out very soon that it's a desire that's being thwarted. But it's this thing within me that has these desires, my own desires, my own way. The world is not cooperating with what I want, what I need. Mm-hmm. And so that we find out very soon that this false ego is the root problem. And even in Krishna consciousness, we're going on and we're doing our things and our services, but that's still there for many of us, for me at least. But I'm staying aware of it. And I want it to die away. I want the false ego to die away from the center, and I want Krishna to again sit on that throne. Krishna is meant to sit on the throne in the inner sanctuary of everyone's heart. And so when we read about Khatvanga, and you just look at these verses here, what he's saying, it's very clear that this dying away of the false ego, the reason why he's able to focus his mind in just a few moments completely on the Supreme is because he already died when he was living. He died to the false ego already. You know, just listen how he's speaking. Not even my life is dearer to me than the Brahmanas. So right there, even in that first line, he's saying that actually the Brahmanas, they represent the Lord. Not even my own life is as important as that. What then do we speak of everything? What then to speak of everything else in my life? My kingdom, my land, my opulence, my wife. And he says, I was never attracted, even in my childhood, by insignificant things or irreligious principles. I did not find anything more substantial than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is an upcoming verse, but I just to, again, you can't speak this way unless the false ego has already died. He says, therefore, I should now give up my attachment for things created by the external energy of the Supreme Lord. I should engage in thought of the Lord and should thus surrender unto him. And then he says this material creation is like an imaginary town. One must give up this attachment and surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's able to do that with complete focus because the false ego has already been gone. He was going on with duties as a warrior and things like this, but this had already happened. So this has to happen. So the remembrance of death is not that, again, we're visualizing ourselves on a deathbed, but it's in our daily life that we keep returning to this. And it's a prayer from the heart, Krishna, please allow the false ego who's in the center, allow this false ego to die away from the center, and you again take that seat in my heart. That's the wish of the devotee, and that desire gets stronger and stronger and stronger to the degree that we want it, which means we have to see it. We have to even feel the lamentation. We have to go through the difficult feelings sometimes and see what's causing them. And then have this one goal, this one cherished goal that the false ego steps aside and Krishna comes and again takes position as the supreme. So I'll stop here. It's a little past 8 o'clock and see if there are just any, we have a few minutes if anyone has any thoughts, comments, questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Srimad
Hare Krishna.
Bhagavatam ki Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. Well, two things. One is, yesterday I had asked this question: how is it that suddenly, at the end of Kavanka's life, he was able to, devote his consciousness totally, seemingly suddenly, at the end of his life, and I feel like you answered this question today, that it really wasn't that sudden, because, as you said, he had kind of removed his false ego throughout his life. He had put Krishna on the throne, so it really wasn't as sudden as it might have appeared. But I did. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but I actually had my actual question is, when you said that, when we find ourselves in that inner sanctum, that's, no matter what we're going through, we always see ourselves there. But the modes are always moving. So when you mentioned about the modes always moving, the modes always give me problems in more ways than one. And so I'm always trying to understand better, things that are said about the modes. So my understanding is that modes always moving means things like, our desires for selfish enjoyment, those are always changing. Our other external circumstances are always changing. Things that, we may or may not be in control of, those are also, how should I say, those are also manifestations of changing modes. So I don't know if you could give me any more clarity than that on when you said modes are always changing.
Yeah, in other words, the modes of nature are, these are influences, the environment. So, some sangha, some particular association that I have that may change life to life, and those modes get inside of me. Rupa Goswami says the Jivatma is like spatika. Spatika means like a crystal. So if you put a crystal in a blue room, what color does the crystal become? Blue. Let's say that the blue light turns into a yellow light. Then what color does the crystal become? Yellow. So the Jivatma is this crystal. And whatever is happening in the room, so to speak, the environment, gets into us. So it's the modes changing, not so much my decisions. We always feel like it's our own decisions, but actually we are so vulnerable and so helpless that as the modes shift, the people that I'm around, things that I'm taking in, all of this is also changing, and my desires therefore are changing, sometimes in the mode of ignorance, sometimes in the mode of passion. So those shift life after life, but the whole, and the point I was bringing up was that, but it's always, the desires change, but they're always my desires. And why is that my so strong? And that's when we come deeper into ourselves and see that the false ego is the thing that's causing me to be so helpless within the material energy.
Okay. Yeah. putting it in terms of the influences that surround us,
Yeah.
including the influences from our own mind,
Yes.
is helpful, because when it comes from our own mind, we don't see it as external to us, like, something in the house or something in the town. We see it as ourselves, so it doesn't seem like an external influence, right?
Right. But it is an external influence because that it got in there. It got in there. It's not the pure soul's mind. It's not
Yes.
the pure thinking that we actually also have, but we're disconnected from. So even our thoughts, we feel like they're mine, but they're really from the outside, and we claim them as our own. But they're also it's also something outside that got in, and now we identify with it.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ghanashyam Prabhu, really for showing what is the real gift in contemplation of death. Generally, people say gift in contemplation of death. However, you showed the real spiritual meaning of gift in the contemplation of death and how to do it. There are more comments as well as questions on the chat if you have a few more minutes.
Sure.
Adbhuta Krishna Prabhu had asked, like, living in constant remembrance that everything is temporary can sometimes be a traumatic experience, especially when you're not in a spiritually realized stage. That means like when we are in a practitioner stage. So it is like living in a non-real reality while not having experienced the real spiritual reality. So there might be faith in the teachings, but no experience of spiritual reality. That can be quite traumatic. So eager to hear your thoughts.
Well, that's true. That's true. When we don't have a spiritual connection, we have no ground. We're not grounded in truth or in God. And then when we see life disconnected from God, then it is very frightening. And and the meditation on death becomes more dark, and we become maybe anxious and panic. Um, there's many possibilities in our minds and different directions we can go, and this connection from God is there, and that will be felt. So that's a true statement. And as we get more and more connected to who we are, to truth, to service to the Lord, and as we focus more and more, take shelter of the Lord, then there should be some relief from some of these fears. The fear is very deep rooted, and again, what's uh, in a very the more we face that false ego and pray for Krishna, because we also can't just transform ourselves, but we can desire that more and more. And we're going to desire it when we feel the problem of the false ego. You see, like if you're feeling at all times, if you're aware that, oh, there's this thing in me that just won't move out of the way for Krishna. So contained within that lamentation is also a desire that Krishna does help. We beg for that mercy that Krishna takes over our life. We start wanting that more and more. And so actually only when that is accomplished can we overcome the fear of death. So it's all a degree of fear. Some people are very fearful. They have no connection spiritually, as you mentioned. And some people have a little connection. Some people are overcoming the false ego. And when the false ego is finally overcome by Krishna, I was hearing a class by Prabhupada the other day, and he was quoting the famous verse from the Gita, surrender unto me, I will protect you, Krishna says. So Prabhupada was saying in the class, our business is just to surrender. Krishna's business is then to liberate us, is to completely liberate us from the false ego, ultimately. So he has to accomplish it, but a part of us has to just be willing to keep trying to surrender, to keep praying, to keep serving with the wish, with the desire that Krishna comes and takes over our lives. So only when that is done is the fear of death actually gone. Because the fear of death is in the false ego. it is one with the false ego. So long we think we're this body, then we have to fear death because the body's dying, I'm identified, and we take it as I'm dying. It's the end. So fear and false ego are one. So only when the false ego is gone does a person actually become fearless.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful answer of showing the connection between fear and false ego. And here, Karthik Prabhu has also another question on the chat. Like he's saying, like, we can understand that death is destiny for everyone, but is the time of death also destiny? Because it seems that most people have problem with its timing. Could it be that the timing is more a matter of chance than destiny because it disrupts our plans?
There's some statement in the Shastra that as soon as a person is born, they have a certain amount of breaths that are already given. And so, in a certain way, the actual moment of death is also known, maybe not to us, but everything in the material world is kind of calculated in that way. These are all laws of nature. Everything can be measured. It's like perfect mathematics, right? You have some action and there's a reaction that must come from this action, and so everything works in that way. So it's said that when you're born, actually the exact moment of death is also already known. And and people will say, well, what about they have these machines now that can make you breathe longer, even though you were supposed to have died? But that doesn't change anything. That's just a machine that's been created. So that may add 7 or 8 breaths, but those 7, 8 breaths were also destined. They just came through a different way. They came through now some machine that man created. It doesn't take away the it's not that whatever we create is blocking all of these laws of nature, or somehow we're overcoming them. They still take place. They just now your last 10 breaths, let's say, instead of just being here or there, they came through a particular machine, but it's still just 10. You won't get 11 like that. And so that's my understanding.
Very much so. Thanks for taking out your time. And I really, really appreciate, as Andrea has also mentioned, how you very calmly present such an important and serious subject matter with full focus. So really appreciate your ability to convey wisdom in such simple words, which is very touching and practically can make us contemplate on important subject matters in spiritual life. So thank you very much for your contribution as always.
Krishna.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Is this Ghanashyam Prabhu ki jai?
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you. Thank you for see you, everyone. Hare Krishna tomorrow.
Hare Bo.